Okay. So my name is Brenda Jin. I'm a UI developer at Macy's.com. If you'd like to tweet at me, my handle is cyberneticlove. A little bit about this presentation. There's going to be an overview, a general overview of tablets, market, why tablets, some strategy for responsive web design. It's definitely not comprehensive, but I will be talking about some tools to help you make decisions that are best for your product. And also there will be more of a technical session towards the end where we'll talk about some dev tools and debugging and stuff like that, and browser idiosyncrasies. A little bit more about this presentation. Because I do work in e-commerce, there is this e-commerce product lens. So yeah, here we go. So I'd like to start off with a little bit of informal market research right here in the room. With a show of hands, how many of you own a tablet? Nice. All right. Feel free to keep your hand up so everyone can look around the room and see what that looks like. It's a pretty high percentage. Now here's a good one. How many of you have parents or children who own a tablet? All right. A little less than 50%. And how many of you have grandparents or grandchildren who own a tablet? All right, well, 3 of us. Cool. So a story I like to tell is about my grandmother who got an iPad mini for her 80th birthday. And she lives in Boston with my parents, and every time they go anywhere, she likes to take pictures with her iPad mini, and then she goes home, gets online, and then chats with her relatives in China about what she did, and she shares her photos with them, which is really cool. And I actually went on vacation with her sister, so my great aunt and my great aunt's family, and we drove down Highway 1 to Big Sur. And then they were tired at the end of the day, and when we got to our cabin, they all sat down on the couch. So my great aunt, her husband, and their daughter, they're all from China, and then each of them pulled out a tablet, and they started browsing the web and sending emails and talking to people back home. So there definitely is a diverse demographic that uses tablets, which I think is pretty cool. So the International Data Corporation, IDC, has reported that tablet sales are projected to surpass PC sales in Q4 of 2013. There is a little bit of a tapering off from what was previously predicted, but what is definitely certain is that PC market shares are declining. There's kind of a fuzzy future ahead of us. Between phablets, wearables, and tablets, it's not quite sure what will become, if any, the dominant computing connected device for us in the future. But what's important is that we prepare ourselves for what the market is currently doing and for what might be coming next. So we need to think about strategies that help us create contextual and relevant experiences for all kinds of in-between devices. So that's anywhere from thinking about our APIs and our interface design to forward-thinking technological ecosystems. I want to talk a little bit about web optimization for tablets. I'm definitely in the responsive web camp, not in the adaptive camp, so we could talk about that a little more if you have questions later. But I like to use CSS3 media queries to target in-between screen sizes within a certain range. With tablets, you do have limited screen real estate as compared with the desktop, and similarly to the smartphone. So when you're creating your responsive web design, there is a need to take a look at your information architecture and really prioritize what is important for your user, your customer, and their experience. A lot of people like to use UI frameworks. Does anyone want to call out a couple of them? Feel free to just shout it out. jQuery Mobile, Bootstrap, Foundation. Okay, so those are a couple. Some of them may only give you one breakpoint for a smartphone, so if you're thinking about responsive web for tablets, that's something I would look at. And I also encourage you to look at the framework's website on the tablet that you're targeting. It may surprise you what you see. You may like it, you may not. You may realize what kinds of adjustments you'll have to make to the framework to make it work for you. At the same time that you are encountering limited screen real estate and having to prioritize your content. You also have a larger screen than a smartphone, so it does give you a little bit more flexibility to create a more rich interaction for your user. You're also likely to have more of their attention. They're probably not going to be as on the go. They might be sitting on a couch at home and have a couple more seconds or minutes to spare for you. So you have a little more space to create the experience that you want. If you already are smartphone optimized, I highly recommend adding another breakpoint and thinking about that in-between size because of where the market is going in terms of all kinds of devices and because of the diversity of tablets that are out there. If you don't already have a mobile optimized site, I encourage you to start with at least 2 breakpoints, one for your smartphones for that quick on-the-go information and one for your in-between touchscreen devices like tablets. So now you might be asking, which tablets? There are a lot of different screen sizes, a lot of different screen resolutions, all kinds of browsers. When it comes to deciding which tablets you support, analytics is definitely your friend. One thing you can do is take a look at your current analytics and what kinds of tablet visitors you're getting. Another thing you should probably do is, because the landscape is changing so quickly, you should look at quarter to quarter and compare which are the emerging tablets that are going to be more popular and predict which ones you should be supporting when you're finally ready to launch some features. If you don't already have analytics and you're in an early stage, you should think about maybe overall market trends, but also think about who is your audience and what might they be using. So now I'm going to talk about a couple technical tricks. These are ones that I use in my day-to-day work life, and ones that I hope will give you the tools to make informed decisions about your responsive web architecture. So the first and most important point I can make is that debugging is very essential. I recommend debugging on an actual device and not just in a simulator. There's a lot of things that you will never see in a simulator or an emulator, and you will not be able to accurately recreate the entire touch and interaction ecosystem that goes into a device. So what I do is I serve my website up on localhost, and then I go to the address on our tablets that we support, and I do the testing that way. So for the Android devices, you can use a Chrome browser plugin, and that will help you connect over USB to a device and let you use the Chrome tools that you already use to debug, measure, test. And then for iOS, you can use the same USB technique with the special set of remote debugging instructions. So if you want to go to my slides later, here are 2 links for how to get that set up. So I wanted to go over an example that illustrates why this is so important to test on the device itself. And I'll be using a Nexus 7 and an iPad, and they're both the kind of smaller size tablets because that's what fits in my bag easier. Okay. So bear with me as I set this up for you. Hopefully I will be on the Wi-Fi. Start over here. So on the right, we have a Nexus 7. And what I've done is I've created a fixed position element, which is the 2 dark boxes and the text input, and then I've just dropped lorem ipsum on the page. The fixed position element is quite popular with mobile devices. People like to have persistent navigation so that their users can get back and forth to wherever they need all the time, especially if there's a lot of content on the page, and that way they don't have to scroll all the way back up. But there are fixed position rendering issues in tablet browsers, and I'm going to show you some of them. So I'm just going to scroll down on this page, and you can see what happens. So that second fixed position element is jumping. And that's something you would never see in a simulator or an emulator. So now on the iPad mini, this is the same page, again, with the two fixed position elements and a text input. I'm going to scroll, and we don't have the same problem, so the second fixed position element is not jumping. But what happens when we scroll down a little bit and we highlight the text input is that your header just dropped to the middle of the page. This is also something you might not see in a simulator or emulator. This is very specific to the mobile Safari. So the way around the Android issue is to make sure that everything is semantic and nest everything within one fixed position element. So however you want to do your positioning inside of that element is up to you. With the iOS, it's a little bit tricky. There are some tools, like I think iScroll will help you out with this. What I've done is, one, avoid having a text input nested in a fixed position element, and if it's not avoidable at all, you can have an event listener when the user focuses on that text input, immediately scroll them to the top of the page, swap the positioning of the header to absolute, and then when they're done, quickly swap it back to fixed position. Of course, that's not entirely ideal, but it's one way to fix this. So my second piece of advice, or my second tip, is to get in touch. It's very important to understand exactly what a touch event object looks like. It can be tempting to try to use another tool because they're different than mouse events. But I'm going to show you how to inspect those events and event objects right now using the remote debugging. So what I'm going to do is we can start with the iPad. I'm going to open up my developer tools, and this is how you would do it in Safari. Let me show you the page. And what I'm going to do is create an event listener and just console log the event object. Is there a way to zoom in on this? Okay. So I'll just read it to you because it looks a little bit small. It's window.addEventListener touch start, and then a function with console log string touch start colon, and then comma the event. So no zoom. Nope, that's not how to zoom. Okay. So I apologize, it's a little bit hard to see, but I'll go ahead and create some touch start events. So there we go, and you can see the second one is the event, and I'm also going to show you touch end. Do you have Command plus? I did, and that's not working for me. Yeah. So I'll just read you anything that is hard to see. So all this is now is touch end, so you'll see a touch start and a touch end. Touch start, touch end. Okay, great. So now if we look at the touch start touch event, we have quite a number of parameters, and let's see, layer X and layer Y, we have some values, and page X, page Y, we have some values. We can see the targets, the list of touches, the type of event that it was. That's all pretty cool. Now I'm going to take you over to the Android. We're going to inspect the elements. 2. And we're going to do the same thing in the Chrome Developer Console. Again with touch start. And then I'll also do a touch end. So you can see the same thing happening. Great. So now I just want to compare these side by side to illustrate the importance of actually doing this with the debugging tools. I'm going to open up this touch start event. And you might not be able to see it in the back, but does anyone in the front see a difference between the two events? Feel free to call it out. Yes, no coordinates. So if you had only looked at this in iOS, it probably would have worked really well. And then you would have gone to an Android device and discovered that things were broken. So the event object is actually different on different browsers. However you want to deal with that is up to you. But it's actually, I'm going to show you if I can find it. It's in touches, the 0 index, and here is your page X and page Y. So another question I get asked a lot is about how to choose some of the tools that are available. How do I pick a library, a shim, a polyfill, a framework? And to help you make that decision, well, it's up to you and your product and what all you're trying to accomplish. To help you make that decision, I've come up with a mnemonic. And because we're on the subject of touch, the mnemonic is caress. So C stands for conflict. How is this tool going to work with my current code base? Are there going to be namespace conflicts? Is it going to play well? Another one is attitude. If this is an open source tool, what's the attitude of the author like? If I have to report an issue, is it going to be this like negative social interaction, or are they just going to ignore me and not respond? Because chances are, if it's an open source tool, you will run into issues and you will have to either debug them yourself or contact the author. So I always go on the issues page of the GitHub repository and just see whether or not I can relate to how the author responds to certain issues and bugs. Another one is recentness. Because the landscape of tablets changes so quickly, you want to make sure that this tool that you're using was recently updated and that you can count on it to be continually updated. For example, if you were using something to help you map your touch events from maybe 6 months ago, it might have become out of date with the release of iOS 7. Another thing to look out for is reason. Why do you want this tool? Is it holistic? Is it going to touch all aspects of your website? Or is it going to be to accomplish one small thing? And if it's going to accomplish one small thing, make sure it's only going to affect that one part of your code base. One tool that I like to use is a shim called FastClick. And what it does is, if you like to write click events for your pages, in Android there's no problem, but there is a 300+ millisecond delay on iOS browsers. And what FastClick does is it helps you reduce that delay, and it does the logic to make sure that when you're touching, it's not scrolling, and to figure all of that out for you. Another one is ease. How easy is it for you to start using this tool, and how easy is it for future people on your team to also start using this tool? If it's not easy, does the benefit outweigh the cost of time that it takes to learn how to use it? Finally, we have style and size. Style is about the way that the tool is written. If you're using a certain type of style of code in your code base, does this match? Is it readable to you? Because you might have to go through and debug it. And if it's not readable and not understandable, it might be more challenging than it's worth. If you use AMD, asynchronous modular development, is that what it stands for? Like require or common, does that fit in, or are you going to have to retrofit the entire tool? And size, because we're dealing with limited memory, I really recommend getting the smallest tool that you possibly can. That goes also back to not picking a big tool if all you need is one small thing. Another tip that I have is to measure. So we looked at the developer tools that we know and love for desktop that we can use over USB with the mobile browsers. It's important to use some of the measurement tools to understand what's going on with the device. So I have this example of an image load on Place Kittens. We'll see how it goes. What I've done is I've created an infinite scroll page, and every time you scroll to the bottom, it adds more images to the page. We can also take a look at another page as well. Let's see. So we'll go here. Well, actually, maybe we should do this with Chrome. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure, let's do memory. So I'll start recording. I'm just going to scroll, wait, scroll, oops, where did we go? And wait. So this way you can zoom in and you can see what's going on at a particular point in time. Another thing you can do is look at frames, so to make sure that your image rendering isn't making your frame rate drop. This is especially important because memory management is crucial for these tablet devices. If you don't manage your memory correctly, the entire browser will crash, and that will not be beneficial for your users. Another thing you can do with this is measure page load time on the device. So that's pretty cool. And finally, my last tip is, this is kind of opinionated, but I think that technology should be able to provide feedback for design. Because you're dealing with things like limited memory, limited screen size, and just a smaller computer than a desktop, it's important that design and technology work together to figure out the design and implementation challenges and how they can be executed very well. I know that's not possible at some companies, but whenever possible, I think that conversation needs to happen. So finally, I have a list of some more resources for you. Again, the link to the slides. The last letter is a capital I, as someone pointed out. A couple more links up there, and the links again for Android and iOS. And now I can answer some questions if you have any.
How are you doing that remote debugging?
How am I doing the remote debugging is the question. Does anyone want me to walk through how to set that up? Okay, show of hands. Okay, great. So I'll just go through that now. It'll take about 10 minutes. So what you want to do, let's see, let me start with Android. First, you want to get this extension. I think it's like the ADB plugin. And that way you don't necessarily have to set up ADB, the tool, the command line utility and stuff. You can just get it as a Chrome plugin. And then what you want to do is make sure your developer tools are enabled in Chrome. And then you're going to go over to your Android device. If you have a Samsung tablet, you might need to install a special driver for the USB. But you're going to go to your settings. And then go to developer options will not be available right from the get-go, so you need to enable them. You'll go to tab about tablet and then click or tap on build number 7 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then the developer tools will appear right here. And you will want to make sure that USB debugging is enabled. From there, you'll go back to Chrome. You will go to your settings. You will go down to developer tools and then make sure USB web debugging is on. Then you connect via USB and you should start seeing your device right here if you view inspection targets. I really like this version of Chrome because it allows port forwarding. So one of the kind of annoying parts of the localhost is having to check my IP address and then enter all these numbers and dots in a touch interface, which is actually time-consuming. So this actually lets you do some port forwarding, and I'll show you that. It's really cool. So I have 5,000 and localhost 5,000 set up. So now I can just go to localhost 5,000 on my Chrome browser and get the same website that I'm serving, regardless of whether my IP address has changed. So now we'll do the same thing for iOS Safari. So for Safari, you will need to make sure that your developer tools are enabled. So you're going to go to your preferences, go to advanced, and at the bottom, you're going to show develop menu and menu bar, and this appears. Then in your device, You'll go to Settings. Let's see. Safari. Advanced. And then turn on the Web Inspector. And then in your desktop Safari, you will see, you have to have Safari open. You will see the different tabs that you have, and you can inspect them. And it works just like your desktop. So when I hover over this page, it highlights. And if I want to inspect any of the DOM nodes, I can, which is pretty cool. So you can traverse the DOM tree that way. Does that answer your question? Okay, great. So one caveat is that this does not work for like the Samsung native browsers. It works for the Chrome browser on a Samsung device. It's also not ideal for things like Kindle. So what I do is I inspect and debug on the devices that I can, and I have this tool for, and then hope that it covers more of the use cases, and then for the other ones, I just have to do some additional testing and playing around. I have tried to use Adobe Edge Inspect, but it's really hard with the latency to get the type of response that I needed. Does anyone have another question? Yep.
Have you tried to use Winery?
Well, what's that?
It's W-E-I-N-R-E. It's an open source project that allows you to get at least some inspector support in browsers that don't support it.
Oh, cool. I haven't, but I will take a look. Thank you. Any other questions? So the question is about optimizing images on different types of devices. One thing you can do with your images is make sure that the image size is not bigger than it needs to be. So however you do your API calls or however you're getting that information for the image, that needs to be optimized. The other thing is you probably want to pick a range, and within that range, I set the image width, and then the height can automatically be done. But you have to arrange the elements around it to make sure that it looks appropriate.
But wouldn't it be needed that you download a different size file for different versions of the tablet? So would they be needed at all? Like for example, you have a high resolution image, it works for iPad with 56, right?
Yeah.
So iPad 2 may not use that.
Yeah, so the question is about different size images for different display resolutions, and yes, that is part of the optimization process. Any other questions? Okay, well, again, my Twitter handle is cyberneticlove, and feel free to get in touch with me and say hello. Thank you.